Hey guys, how's it going? This is Natnator. Welcome back to your weekly dose of creepypasta. This one was kind of fun to record. You'll know why as you go. But before you get going, a massive thank you as always to the patrons over on Patreon. You guys are the best. We're now into the month of November. Support the channel and visit me on Patreon via the link in the description. Big shoutouts to the disciples. Tiffany, Back a Puff, Subscribe SoundCloud, Teddy Dog, Vlad Dracula, Backwards D-Dog, Al Hazred, Michelle Golden, Vera Ohio, and Rambo Rowe. Thank you so much. I appreciate the extra support. It really goes a long way. Now, as always, turn out the lights, get comfortable, and let the story begin. Salem, Massachusetts, Police Department, Public Records. Case: Jason Doolittle, resident of Salem, suspected victim of occult murder. Status: case closed. Ruling: accidental death due to rotted floorboards and delusions. No foul play involved. Summary of evidence: victim's body, crime scene and related evidence. 6 handwritten pages by the victim dated just prior to death. Typed narrative by victim. Publicly released by Chief of Police. Narrative is transcribed below. Well, Mr. Doolittle, you should have your whole bathroom gutted, I'd say, said the plumber. But that's not my job. The plumber hiked up his pants as he stood. He'd been peering at the pipes in my bathroom and thought everything looked fine, which was weird because that didn't help explain my water problem at all. I paid him his fee and he left, having been a waste of time and money. Well, except for suggesting I have my entire bathroom redone. That wasn't a waste, but that could prove to be useful advice later. It has been 3 days since the problems in my bathroom started. 3 days ago, I was cleaning out my shower when I noticed that some of the tiles on the wall had cracked. I knew my house was old, but I thought the bathroom had been a fairly new renovation. According to my realtor, there was no reason for anything to be broken or old, at least in the bathroom. And yet here I was. My whole shower was literally rotting. My shower has a shelf that is positioned about stomach height and goes down to the floor. It's more like a niche or an indent in the wall than a shelf, but it works just as well. And that was where I set my shampoo and soap and whatnot. That was where I had noticed the tiled wall cracking. I'd cleaned away some of the broken tiles and found that the wooden shelf that supported the tiles was itself rotting. After some more exploration, I found out soon after that my bathroom's framework was entirely made of wood, and it was all rotting. Especially the shelf. That same day, I tore the wooden shelf away to see what was underneath. Beneath it, I found to my surprise that there was a large, hollow space inside the walls of my bathroom, like a secret passageway. I poked a flashlight inside and looked around, but saw nothing more than insulation and more rotten wood. Exactly what I expected to find in what I thought was a crawl space. There was, however, something that caught my eye just inside the shelf. Right at the top, near where I'd broken the board off, strange symbols were carved into the wood. They were fading with the rot. Most of them looked like carved smudges, but a few stood out as being surprisingly well preserved. I checked the board I'd ripped out of the shelf and found that the underside, the part facing the empty area in the wall, also had these same symbols. It occurred to me again that the bathroom had indeed been a recent addition to the house. But how long had this crawl space in the wall been there? I would have to ask the people I was renting it from, I thought to myself. That was when the water troubles started. The same evening as when I pulled the old boards up, the water from the tap in the bathroom began to run brown with rust. At least, I assumed it was rust. I wondered if perhaps I had knocked a pipe or something during my explorations. But the visit from the plumber a couple days later showed these beliefs to be unfounded, and now here I was. I wasn't sure what to do now. All the problems were confined to my bathroom, which, unfortunately, had the only toilet in the house. I could still drink water and wash my hands in the kitchen sink, which wasn't having any problems, but any attempt to shower proved futile, as the water still ran brown and stank of something I couldn't quite put my finger on. It wasn't quite an iron smell, though there was that too. It smelled more of old rot. Sometimes the toilet wouldn't flush either, or it would get backed up for no reason. I had the plumber check that out too, but he said there was nothing blocking it. Calling the local utility service didn't do any help either, as they had received no complaints about rusty water or stopped toilets other than my own. They suggested I call a plumber, which, of course, I already tried. Things got worse though. Sometimes I'd get this awful stench rising up from the hole in the wall I'd busted open. One of my friends, when I told him about the crawl space, suggested I stick a fan and a light inside of the space to dry it out, clear out any mold. That same friend, when confronted with the stench, said I should take bleach and spray it around inside. So I did. That only made the smell worse though. It wafted up through the shower, despite the multiple fans I had inside of it. It got so bad that occasionally I had to leave my house entirely. It was the stink of something dead, decaying almost, but so much worse. The bleach did nothing. I suspected that there might have been a raccoon trapped in the wall at some point, and it had died there, but another check by flashlight proved nothing of the sort. At least, nothing I could see. I did, however, find more symbols carved into the wall. I hadn't noticed them before. 2 days later, a total of 5 days after I opened the wall, I began to think the smell was making me hallucinate. Sometimes, when I was looking in the mirror to comb my hair or brush my teeth, I'd see something move out the corner of my eye, or there'd be something off about my reflection that I couldn't quite place. My eyes were too dark, or a freckle was in a different spot. One time, I could have sworn I saw something dark, like a gas, coming out of the hole in the shower, which I hadn't closed yet. But when I turned to face it, there was nothing. But the most real hallucination, though, was the thumping. I heard it sometimes, coming from beneath my feet. It was as if someone was stuck below me, trying to get out, banging on my bathroom floor. It shook me up a little bit, and I tried to stay out of my bathroom, but having only one, I had to go back occasionally. At that point though, I'd been a good 5 days without a shower, and my friends agreed to let me use theirs. They even talked me into calling a renovation company to check out my bathroom. When I called the company, they said they'd look at it and give me an estimate on what it would cost to completely rebuild it. And of course, I let the plumber know he might need to install some pipes for me. I was in my kitchen during most of the estimation process. At one point though, the workers called me in to show me something. They'd accidentally knocked a chunk out of the wall because it had been so rotten, but it wasn't the rot that frightened them. They showed me the piece of wood they broke, and I saw, to my horror, that the backside was entirely covered in the same symbols as the inside of the bathroom shelf. They left soon after that. One of the workers said there wasn't a price I could pay to make him tear down the walls all the way. He was scared by what was underneath, whatever that was supposed to mean. I wasn't sure what to do after that. I called the people I was renting from, and they told me that they'd lower my cost until I got the bathroom fixed. It was an enticing deal, but I got the feeling that the bathroom would take a long time to fix, unless I did it myself, and I couldn't do that to the people who were so nice to offer me such a discount. So I decided to do just that, and began fixing the bathroom myself. I started by taking a sledgehammer to the walls, and knocked a huge chunk out of it. I needed to see what exactly was in there. There had to be something. I finally put a hole in the wall that was big enough for me to crawl through, and I stepped inside the crawl space. With my flashlight, I took a look around. The empty space wrapped all around my bathroom, and even went behind some of my other rooms, like a border to my house. It was surprisingly spacious, but it stunk of rotted wood and something else. The stench of decay was there, strong as ever, but there was more to it than that. There was a chemical, salty smell too. Sulfur, maybe? I shot my flashlight around, looking at the walls of the crawl space, and noticed there were more symbols, hundreds of them, lining the walls and floor on all sides. Many of them had been erased by rot at this point, but they were there. I also suddenly realized what the workers might have meant by what is underneath. The wooden boards that made up the floor of the crawl space were a good foot or so below the floor level of the bathroom, meaning that my house was set above something else. And there was sometimes a gap in the wall, between some floorboards, that led to another empty space beneath the bathroom, almost like a basement. But I didn't have a basement. I got out of there as quickly as I could, stopping only once in the bathroom to look in the mirror. What I saw terrified me. In the mirror was a reflection of me, but it wasn't me. The hair was too long, too greasy to be mine. My face was cut up and bruised, black and blue. My eyes were sunken and glazed, and my arm was slashed in multiple places. I looked like a walking corpse, yes, in the reflection. But what was worse was the reflection of the hole in the bathroom wall. The hole in the reflection was much darker than in real life. And if I looked hard enough, I thought I could see something standing in the shadows. It looked like a man, but he was so covered in shadows that I couldn't make out any features beside his silhouette, except his eyes. They were a bright crimson, but empty looking. There was a hunger in them I didn't like. He opened his mouth, then bared his teeth at me. They were long and sharp, like a vampire's, and red with blood. My blood. Yes, I somehow knew. I got out of there as fast as I could. I ran from my house, outside, and was surprised to see how dark it had gotten. The sun had been high in the sky when I entered the space between the walls. Now it was beginning to set. Darkness would descend soon, and I didn't want to be anywhere in my house when it did. I ran, unthinking, not knowing where to go. I decided that maybe it was high time to look into what those symbols were. It was time to go to the library, I figured. Maybe there'd be something there about my house, too. The streets were empty on the way to the library, and there was no one in the library either. Alone. I could hear someone talking on a phone in the back, but that was it. I ran to the cultural section of the non-fiction books, thinking maybe these symbols were some sort of pagan practice or something. It took me a while, but I finally found some of the symbols in a book about classic witchcraft and hoodoo. The symbols depicted in the book were much crisper than that of the crawlspace walls, but they were fundamentally the same. That was when I figured out just what they were used for. They were protection charms. It didn't take long for me to get a grasp of what that meant. Reading further into it, I found that for hundreds of years, charm symbols, like the one I'd found, were used for keeping away or locking in evil spirits and monsters. And the more that were used, the more powerful the creature was supposed to be. And they had to be perfect, unbroken, too, or the monster could escape. The binds. 7 days ago. Was it really that long? I couldn't be sure. I'd torn up a piece of wood that had been inexplicably rotten. It had symbols on it. Symbols that I now knew were meant to lock something in. I had broken the chain. I'd let something out. But that's ridiculous, right? It was impossible, I concluded. Monsters don't exist, ghosts don't exist, demons certainly don't exist. Why would something be under my bathroom of all places? It hadn't always been a bathroom, though. But still, I'd seen it. The water, the smells, the distorted reflection, the bumping, the thing in the shadows. Yes, yes, yes! And the renovators had seen it too, or heard it. But the question remained, what was underneath? Yes, what? I needed to know, and yet I wanted to be as far away from it as possible. I walked toward the library desk, hoping to ask someone about finding house records or records of strange events. The librarian looked up as I walked over, and she screamed. What? What's wrong? Everything, I asked, trying to see my reflection in some glass behind her. The librarian moved backwards, edging toward her phone in the back room. Sir, your face. I need to call help for you. You're all beaten up, she responded, terrified, scared stiff. Responding to my blank look of confusion, she handed me a pocket mirror. I looked into it. I gasped when I saw what I looked like. My face was exactly as it had looked in the mirror at home, horribly disfigured. In the mirror, my arms were still scratched up, but looking at them without the mirror, just looking, I couldn't see a thing. I felt no pain that would go with the cuts and bruises I'd sustained. But then came the kicker for dread. In the mirror, over my shoulder, I could see the silhouette of a man, completely covered in shadows, save for his eyes and teeth. I dropped the mirror and spun around, fully realizing that nothing would be there. Of course, nothing was. Something was. I'd lost time. Did you? What had happened in those hours I'd somehow spent in the wall? It had felt like minutes when I was there, but nonetheless, less than none. I had lost time, and I was covered in scars that only others could see. Or could you see them? I wasn't sure what to do. I ran home, hoping to find something in the walls to put an end to this. You did. When I got to the bathroom, I looked in the mirror. Reflect yourself. Again, seeing the silhouette in the shadows, watching me. Always watching. This time, there was a new bruise in my reflection. A bruise around my neck, like a noose. Hangman. I turned around, away from the mirror, and seeing no silhouette, I climbed into the wall, picking up the sledgehammer I dropped earlier. It was time to see what was underneath. I climbed back out into my bathroom. It wasn't long before I broke through the floorboards and rotted wood, working my way into the space beneath my bathroom, smashing down through the floor. It was dark, and my flashlight flickered unpredictably as I first looked inside. It was a small space, smaller than I imagined, but had an ominous feeling, like a great weight of dead dread was on my chest. I carefully dropped down into the small space, knowing it would be difficult to get out again. I looked around. Red eyes. There were no symbols on the wall here, but as I looked at the floor, dirt floor, there was one massive symbol. Damn pagans! Scrolled on the ground. I looked around and noticed there was absolutely nothing else. No decaying body, no silhouette, nothing. It was dark, so dark, all around, and I looked up into my bathroom. I'd broken through the floor. What was underneath? And the light above me faltered ominously. I thought for a second. I saw the silhouette. It was there, smiling above me in the bathroom. But it was gone. What was I going to do now? Where was it? I grabbed the ledge that was just above me, pulled myself up into the bathroom. I looked around, eyeing the hole in the wall. Perhaps I really had been crazy the whole time, or there had been some sort of hallucinogenic gas in the space that I'd accidentally released. But I looked in the mirror, and my face was horrible, normal. My chaotic experience was over, and it was dawn. Darkness of night. How had I lost so much time, though? Time is relative. When I went back to see the librarian later, knowledge can kill, claimed I had scratches, but there were none. You didn't see her. Why were the symbols there? Or were they there at all? Was I hallucinating? Was she hallucinating? What was that stench? So many questions unanswered, but I would hopefully put this all behind me now. I glanced in the mirror one more time, smiling, teeth like daggers, to myself. Everything would be just fine. Everything deteriorates. Everything decays. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. Everything would be just fine. Everything rots. End of transcribed evidence. Post-case report, filled by Chief of Police. They found the body 2 days after his death. The search began when he hadn't shown up for work 2 days in a row, and his boss complained. Jason Doolittle had fallen into a crawl space beneath his bathroom and suffered a broken neck, killing him instantly. We were quick to dismiss the case, saying that the strange symbols around the bathroom had nothing to do with the accidental death of Mr. Doolittle. There was nothing occult about his death, not even the enormous symbol placed directly in the middle of the space Jason had fallen into. I personally went into the crawl space, something only I and Jason have done. It seemed completely normal, disregarding the symbols. The official cause of death, as filed in the local court system by myself, was accidental death due to rotten floorboards and delusions. The doctors blamed some sort of paranoia or schizophrenia when Jason told his friends about strange bathroom troubles and seeing things in the mirror. His friends encouraged him to get help, but he never had the chance, even with the various companies he called to renovate the bathroom. A few days before he died, he apparently would have bouts of insanity, huddling in his house and screaming at nothing. He would cut his arms and bang his head against the wall. He once attempted to hang himself, but the rope broke. When he was lucid, it seemed he tried to actively figure out what was in his house. Ultimately, of course, what was underneath turned out to be rotten floorboards. Exploring the house, we found a letter written by Jason, showing strong signs of delusions and mental illness. It was written a day before he died. There was a lot about death hiding in the shadows of his crawl space, in the walls and below him waiting. There was a lot about things seen in the mirror and how he had to defend himself. He showed signs of having hallucinated strongly, even when he was lucid, if you want to call it that. He also wrote the above story on his computer before he died. Though the events as he tells them do not directly correlate with the actual events leading up to his demise, there is some truth in what he says. The chaos of his final days is well reflected in the narrative he wrote, but there is one major difference. Jason never made it out of the space below his bathroom. His body was found there, sprawled on the ground, with pieces of the floor scattered around. He never broke through the floor with a sledgehammer. He tripped and fell, splintering the weakened floorboards, falling into what was underneath. His visit to the library was the last reported sighting of him lucid before he died. The librarian said he was covered in cuts and bruises, and his eyes had a glazed look to them. She neglected to call the police after he left, assuming he went to a hospital. She claimed he was mostly rational. Much about his final days is not known, or when or how he wrote the story above. There is one catch, though, that makes this otherwise depressing story of a man gone insane, possibly by gas poisoning, more interesting. When the librarian got her mirror back, a symbol was scratched into it. A symbol exactly like the one that Jason fell into, beneath his floor. The librarian also mentioned occasionally seeing a shadow with scarlet eyes and red teeth in the mirror Jason held, but she told us it disappeared after a while. She hasn't called since. It is suspected Jason had some connection with the symbol in the mirror, possibly scratching it in while he had the mirror in his possession. Even with all of this, something nags at my mind. The renovators that Jason called filed only one sentence about the house in their reports. We cannot know what was underneath. There is something about this cryptic sentence that bothers me. It is impossible for us to know what was underneath, because we cannot grasp it, or because if we knew, it would destroy us, as in, opening it at all would release something. How much of Jason's tale is true? What really happened in those days? No, I must be daydreaming. That basement was filled to the brim with mind-altering gases. These questions are preposterous. Anyway, it is a terrible story of a collectively shared, gas-induced delusion. But something still remains. Of the hundreds of thousands of symbols carved into the wall, some were broken, and if it were a chain, that means the chain itself was broken. It would release something, then. Something that is now among us. What was underneath, would no longer be underneath. It would be free, but that is, of course, ridiculous. The gas and this bizarre case are getting to me. My condolences go out to the family and friends of Jason Doolittle. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to call a plumber. There's something wrong with my pipes.